Since the original video went long, we're going to make the retake go as short as humanly possible, and we're going to cover some just basic examples and kind of walk through them one at a time. So for each of these problems, you can solve it in many different ways. You can solve using fractions. You can solve using decimals. Or you can solve using our critical thinking strategies. And that would be finding 10% or 25% and then using that to jump around. Okay? Now, most people are going to usually solve using fractions and decimals and then a little bit of critical thinking as well. Okay? So I'm going to solve each of these a different way to show you the different strategies. Now, number one, I'm going to do using decimals, which means 20% as a decimal is 20 hundredths. Of means multiply times 400. So I will do 400 times 20, remembering that there will be 2 decimals in my answer. And I'm going to do this the longest way just to show you that you don't have to take any shortcuts. 2 digits behind the decimal. So our answer will be 80. So there I used the decimal strategy using the multiplication algorithm. So that's pretty straightforward. This one on the right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fraction strategy with no critical thinking. So I'm going to do it the long way. So 30% is equal to 30 hundredths, which is equal to 3 tenths. I then multiply times 80 over 1. 3 times 8 is 24, so 3 times 80 is 240 over 10 gives me the answer of 24. So there is the traditional fraction algorithm. So now on the bottom, I'm going to mix them up a little bit, okay? What I'm going to do for this problem is I know that 25% times 5 is equal to 125%. Therefore, if I find 25% of 50 and take it times 5, that will be my answer. So 25% is equal to a fourth. So I'm going to do 50 divided by 4. Which will give me 12 and a half. Okay? So then I take my 12 and a half and I multiply times 5 because 25% is 5 times smaller than 125%. And I get 62 and a half for my answer. Last problem is 25% of 15. I used this strategy over here, so I'm going to reuse it again. 25% is equal to a fourth. So I'm going to do a fourth times 15, which gives me 15 fourths, which gives me 3 wholes and 3 extra fourths left over, or the decimal 3 75 hundredths. Once again, if any of that is totally new, make sure you come and talk to me. And now we're going to do 2 more examples, and we're going to solve these each with a linear equation and a proportion to make sure we've shown both strategies. So the equation strategy means we need to find our keywords first. So the first keyword I like to find is because is almost always going to be some sort of equal sign. It's the indicator that we're using an equation. Then percent of means multiply. And then we have our missing number, which is over here. So we have x equals 30% of 160, which means because x is alone, we need to do 30% of this number. So I'm going to do 10% of 160 is 16. So then 30% will have to be 3 times bigger. So 16 times 3 is 48. So our answer must be 48. Just to show the connection, we are going to do this as a proportion as well. So once again, when we set up a proportion, we have 2 equal fractions. One of them will be the percentage, and one of them will be the number we're looking for. So the percent is 30%. Okay, so 30%, whoops, I don't know why I wanted to write that up there, as a fraction is 30 hundredths. Okay, then we have to remember that 30% of something will make our answer smaller. Therefore, our x will be in the top and 160 will be in the bottom. When I cross multiply, I will get 100 times x equals 4,800, which once again will give us x is equal to 48. And so we end up getting the exact same answer both ways. Now, what if our x is not alone? Like, what happens in our problem? And that's what we're going to show right here. Is we have, once again, is equal to, percent of is multiply, and then our what number is now on the same side as where we had. So this is our x. Therefore, we have 75% times x equals 240. And now we have an actual equation where these numbers are not alone already. And all we're going to do is exactly what we did last unit, or last section. You simply divide both sides by 75 hundredths, and we get x is equal to, and now our rule has been when you have long division with decimals, this is where you're allowed to use your calculator. So we get 320 equals x. All right? So for our last part of this problem, we're going to do the proportion. So the fraction on the left will be 75 out of 100. Now, in this case, 75% of something ends up being 24. Therefore, the something has to be our bigger number, so it'll be our denominator this time. 240 is our numerator. And for the sake of time, for cross multiplication, we're not going to work it out, but you should end up getting x is equal to 300 once again. So there's a lot of information here, but none of it should be strictly new on its own. It should just be a nice mixture of all the things that we learned. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know.